Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning into the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
Doing well.
Good.
And I guess you noticed that we had a few people take a look at our program yesterday.
Yeah, we had a record live audience.
I'd like to say it's because we're so great, but it was an important issue, and we had a little bit to say about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's good because that's the whole purpose, because they're hearing a lot about it in this last day or so, but it's all in the wrong direction.
All the same.
It's all to condemn the president when the president is finally doing something we like. But when you look at the people who are yelling and screaming, makes me feel like I'm on the right side when you see Graham didn't like it, Liz Cheney didn't like it, Haley didn't like it, Rubio didn't like it, Mitt Romney didn't like it.
The experts.
So we must be on the right side of this. But I think we mentioned yesterday also that one of the problems with this is that we've gotten involved, and Trump's right when he says we are in too many wars and we never quit. And the main reason that we pointed out is we don't have the proper authority. We don't go in with the consent of the people. We don't go in with a vote of the Congress. And we get in and there's no exit strategy. There's no plan. And I think that's sort of what's going on right now is the neocons wanted to continue it forever. And I mentioned to you a little while ago, if they had their way, we'd still be in Vietnam, trying to teach them a lesson. But it seems like a country like Vietnam learned on their own, and they seem to pick up some Western values without us shoving it down their throat. But this is a big issue. It's a big political issue for Trump, and people are really challenging him on this. But I think he was challenged a year or so ago, too, about when he suggested we leave Syria. And, of course, the theme of what I wanted to talk about today is to give Trump encouragement, because there's been hints maybe he thought he has to, or at least somebody on his staff had to say something. Well, maybe I won't have to do this, and they downplayed it. And so I want to do our best to encourage him to don't give in to these guys.
Yeah.
You're on the right track,
Yeah.
and that's the most important thing. And yet he's up against a great odds, a lot of money, a lot of politicking going on, and it's getting so bad they're looking like they're going to get Hillary to run against him because they think Trump's in so much trouble. But this is not new. We've discussed this thing for, how many years now? The two of us have talked about it for nearly 20 years and many, many wars. And they never go in the correct way, and they never really leave on the correct way. But anytime an ally does something and they back off and things go back to relative normalcy, there's no slaughter and all these dire predictions that the ISIS will come back. They don't know, or they don't want to know, that ISIS comes back when the excuse is because we're there.
Yeah.
So if we say we're going to back off and they say, well, ISIS will come back, well, no, they have to remove the incentive. And of course, that's how Al-Qaeda and all these countries turned against us, is because of our presence over there. But that is not acceptable to ask what the incentives are, because they're evil and we're good, and therefore we have to spend the rest of our lives and all our money going bankrupt to teaching them how great we are, and they'll have to obey us, and that is a failed policy.
And the whole point that ISIS will come back if we leave, that depends on a lie and a propaganda that the media is responsible for in the U.S. And even President Trump, unfortunately, maybe even just for rhetorical reasons, is responsible for. And that is the lie that the United States went in and through our own efforts alone defeated Al-Qaeda and ISIS, and that simply isn't true. The U.S. got involved in 2013 on the ground in Syria. From 2013 to 2015, there was a massive increase in ISIS and Al-Qaeda. It wasn't until 2015, whether you like it or not, it's objectively true. When the Russians and the Iranians came in, they had a heck of a lot more to worry about with ISIS taking over. When they came in and started bombing the holy heck out of them, that's when the tide turned. So this is a lie that the U.S. Completely destroyed ISIS and Al-Qaeda in the U.S. It's not anti-American to say that. It's just being, cognizant of reality. But our title today comes from basically. No sooner did I return from the studio yesterday when I sent you an email saying, "Oh no, here we go again," and it was an article in the U.S. News and World Report, quoting a quote senior administration official on an organized call to the media, and you should have some red flags going way up. And he, quote, appeared to contradict Trump. So here's an unnamed administration official calls up the media, "Hey guys, let's have a conference call. I'm going to tell you what's really going on." He said the U.S. is not removing its forces from Syria in the face of Turkish incursion, only moving the 50 special forces around. Don't worry, nothing's happening. And as the U.S. News points out, that is a conflict with what Trump explicitly said in his tweet, quote, "It's time for us to get out of these ridiculous and endless wars and bring our soldiers home." That is explicit. There's no other way of interpreting it. So the problem with Trump has is that his administration officials, who he obviously can't trust, are going behind his back and completely undermining his policy yet again.
And one of the criticisms he's getting is that he didn't tell everybody what he was planning on doing. And I said, well, that's probably a very good judgment, because I think of the old term a mole.
Yeah.
There's a spy, a mole, but something goes on. He knows it. And I guess government is so big. How do you control everybody who's in the CIA and the FBI to be trustworthy? But they say that once you're in the CIA, you're always in the CIA.
Yeah.
So it's even the former members, that are very much involved. So I would think, even guys like Bolton, who's out of the administration, he's still very instrumental. I think he has friends in there, and I think he might be very bitter now, and who knows what he's up to. He's not sitting around reading newspapers and wondering what's going on in the world. He's very much engaged. So so it's natural for Trump not to tell everybody in the CIA and the FBI and the Pentagon somebody's going to release it.
It's sad but true. And don't forget, not only Bolton, but I would say John Brennan. Remember, he headed the CIA. You can believe he still has a lot of people. I said this on another interview yesterday. A lot of people still in there, a lot of bureaucrats still in there that hate Trump, that like Brennan. I wonder if those two whistleblowers aren't Brennan plants in there. That's another.
Let me just make one quick one. Just remember when Alan Dulles did his worst deeds, he had already been out. He was kicked out. Kennedy got rid of him, and then things got worse.
He still had the puppets.
Yeah, that's right.
But I think on this whole thing about his disloyal staff, I think he knows that people around him are disloyal. That's why he can't tell them, but he still doesn't get it. He should hire a few trustworthy people, and solve it. But I thought it might be nice to survey, and it's kind of a gallery of rogues, literally, to survey the opinion of Washington elite across the board and their reaction to Trump saying, hey, we need to get out of Syria. So let's hit with the first one of our old favorites. This is Mitt Romney. The president's decision to abandon our Kurdish allies in northern Syria is ultimately a victory for Assad, Russia, Iran, and ISIS. The administration must immediately reconsider. Romney, interestingly enough, his foreign affairs expert is the guy that Trump hired to be his new national security advisor. So there he goes again.
It seems like I remember this Mitt Romney from way back.
Exactly. So he hires the guy who gave him his advice. You should have gone with the colonel. Second, let's look at the second one now. Here is McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader. Interesting. Look at that highlighted in yellow, Dr. Paul. Precipitous withdrawal of U.S. forces from Syria would only benefit Russia, Iran, and the Assad regime. That's exactly what Romney said, the exact words. And essentially, if we could just leave that up for a second, essentially what McConnell is saying is that removing American forces would benefit the actual country that they're illegally in. So is that a problem? Benefit. And who has more incentive to fight ISIS than the government that has been fighting it since 2011? But let's move on quickly to the next one, because this is a survey the whole. Here's Lindsay. The Obama libertarian foreign policy does not make America safe. This is not the brightest bulb in the Senate. If ignoring radical Islam made America safe, there would not have been a 9/11. Now, how many things are wrong? We have to stop there, because how many things are wrong with that tweet? Trump is pursuing this is a libertarian Obama foreign policy.
Well, I know he's digging a few people with that. And you know, many times over the years when people used libertarian, it was generally positive. I used to say, isn't it interesting that the politicians I knew in Washington, they'll come up to me and they want to identify with me. It's Ron, I'm a libertarian on this issue.
Yeah.
Well, at least it's a good word. And I said, well, yeah, but nobody has ever come up to me and Ron, I'm a socialist on this issue. But just think publicly now speaking. Here we have a senator who's supposed to be a good friend of Trump, who's condemning libertarianism. Trump's a lot closer than he ever would be. And so it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
And here's the libertarian Obama. 26,000 bombs dropped in 2016 alone. That's libertarian. So let's move on with a couple of these. It's the Rogues Gallery. Let's move along with it. And here's Pelosi. So it's not just those evil Republicans. Trump is deserting an ally in a foolish attempt to appease an authoritarian strongman. This is an interesting one, Dr. Paul, because the Kurds are not an ally. They were a convenient cat's paw for the U.S. in Syria. Turkey is actually a treaty ally to the United States. Pelosi is either being dishonest or she's not very bright, one of the two. Let's don't even speculate on that. But let's move further to the left. We're going from the right further to the left for whatever that means. Here's Ilhan Omar, the great progressive peacenik. What it will do is reward Russia, Iran, and ISIS exactly to the T, what Romney said. This is Washington's foreign policy spectrum. And one final one, here's another man of peace. Here's what he says. Bernie Sanders. I have long believed the U.S. must end our military interventions in the Middle East, but Trump's abrupt announcement to withdraw from Syria is extremely irresponsible. So
yeah,
there you have it. This is the entire spectrum of U.S. foreign policy in Washington.
You know, it's always bothered me over the year that our allies were there to help us if we get into trouble, but it's all just a prop. It's propaganda to show a consensus. But can you just imagine, the Kurds are an ally. So we're having trouble on our Mexican border. It's like an invasion. So we send over a few brigades of the Kurds to help us out. It's so bad. It's the policy's bad, and then when the policy's bad, then the deception just gets carried away. It has nothing to do with decent policy. It has only to do with propaganda, and make it sound like they're the peacemakers and they're the ones that are doing good, and therefore, if you want peace and prosperity, you have to join the gang. And these progressives. It looks like they want to go mainstream. Instead of on a few issues on this, you say, well, some of these socialists that are new in the Congress, actually they're non-interventionists in a sense, but not really. They don't believe in it because they go, and it fits their. When they negotiated the deal, I'll come out for that too.
And Ocasio-Cortez retweeted Ilhan Omar's tweet about that, so she agrees
right?
too. Yeah, these are the great progressives. But let's have a look at the media, Dr. Paul. Maybe we're being unfair. So let's take a look at how the media is reacting. I just did a couple of these because they're all virtually identical. But here's the next one. Here's David Sanger, longtime foreign policy, quote, expert at the New York Times. Here's how he leads in with this. President Trump is once again pursuing a national security strategy at odds with the official position of his government. They're acting as if he is somehow subject to his government. His government is, by ordering this pullback, how dare he go against his government? He is the person, we're not in favor of a strong president, but the president has constitutional authority over foreign policy. Here's Sanger saying, no, he's going against his government.
Well, more narrowly define that, he doesn't have total control of foreign policy. The Senate and others have something to say about it, but he does. It's very explicit that he is a commander-in-chief of the military, and if there is a war endorsed by the Congress, that they can't manage the war, and that's what they drift over into. Because as soon as they disagree with him, all of a sudden they say we're going to save the Constitution. Pelosi, boy, we have Pelosi there. She's always wanting to save the Constitution. If we don't get rid of this guy, the Constitution is going to be destroyed. We need more radical Democrats to save the Constitution.
Yeah, she regrets it. And here's the USA Today, not a far left paper necessarily. This is it. the biggest danger of Syria withdrawal is Trump's lack of a plan. And I know you'd appreciate that, so I'll toss it over to you. This is the mantra.
Yeah, I think this is so typical and what's been going on for a long time. We could go back to the very first war that I remember getting started. I vaguely meant the World War II, but I'm not including that. But I definitely remember the Korean War. Yeah. And even then, even though the United Nations was very young, I was, why are you doing that? You know, I can read the Constitution. And they didn't know exactly what the whole process was about. If it was a threat to national security, we'd go and deal with it and get out. You know, it's over. But we've been there for 50, 60 years. And Vietnam, you know, they didn't know how to get out. So you add up the years that the French were there and add up the years we're there, probably 20 years of killing made no sense whatsoever. So it is the whole idea of not having a strategy. It's not so much that they haven't figured out one about getting out. They don't figure out why they're going in.
the first place.
You know, that is the real thing. And that's one statement there that I quoted, that the very people who beat the drums to get involved here are the ones that are complaining, you know, that things aren't going well. You know, and it's all ISIS, and they never consider maybe our policy has something to do with it. You know, it always annoyed me that when there's a terrorist attack or something, they never ask the fundamental question after a killing has been done. What is the motive? What is the motive for people wanting to kill Americans? They might ask, the other side might ask, what is your motive? Come over. Yeah. You mentioned how many bombs Obama dropped. What is his motive for dropping all these? That's why they set the stage for the conspiracy people. Well, somebody made some money off that. Yeah. You know, they made a lot of money off that. And so you just keep these battles going, build weapons, and we lose them. Even when planes don't work well, we still sell them and let them worry about it. So it's the motive and understanding that they don't want to do. They don't make the plan why we go in. If we knew why we went in, we would know when we should leave.
And that's why President Paul would have been so much simpler for America, you know. It would have been easy to understand because your strategy boils down to just 9 words. We just marched in, we can just march out, right?
I remember that.
You don't need a lot of paragraphs. You don't need to have Pompeo come out and explain it or anything. It's very simple, just a little sentence, you know. But, you know, we're talking about, okay, this is what the elites think. And they're always wrong. They've been wrong on every war. But let's go back to the last time that President Trump said, hey, we need to get out of Syria. And everyone, the same people freaked out. They're the ones who wanted to get us in. And they took a poll, and I think we'll probably get a poll in a few days, and it may be different. But here's what it was, the final clip we have. Here's a poll from Pew, I think it was, in January of this year. Remember, Mattis had a panic attack and quit over it. And the American people, though, had a different view. U.S. public split over withdrawing troops from Syria. And here's a percentage. 43% said right decision, 45% said wrong decision. That's pretty equal. But look at the Republicans, Dr. Paul. 58% of Republicans say yes, great idea. Only 30% say it's too early, it's the wrong decision for now. So if you look at President Trump's base and look at those numbers, clearly at this point the American people were with him. I would say, I don't know what the polls will come out with, but I would say the number should be even stronger because a year has passed, and to what effect? Nothing has changed in a year.
I meet a lot of young people and others who are very frustrated. What can I do? One person can't do anything, and they just don't know how to handle this. But the whole thing is that the American people are with us. Yeah. I firmly believe the American people are for peace. You know, but then they get talked into it. I know how long it took to propagandize and get the American electorate charged up to go after that Hitler that was running Iraq. Yeah. You know, and the problems that still exist there. So I think the American people want peace. The peace candidate generally wins. I think Trump should not back down, and just because they're giving him trouble, because I'm sure he wants to be reelected. So he just has to show what he stands for on this. That's why one of the motivations for us today is because we can see the factions working and the people who have influence and all the media people that you just talked about. He's up against these great odds, and he needs to be encouraged on this. And you gave him some of the best advice is, be more careful on who you appoint. I mean, you're trying to get rid of these people. I call them moles, and they're part of the swamp. They're spying on them, but he was going to reduce the NSA, I think, by some personnel.
Yeah, NSA staff. Yeah, that's good.
So that is good, but I think it's important, and we should do our very best to encourage the president. And of course, as you mentioned yesterday, it didn't take us long to reappraise. Does this mean that all our encouragement is for naught? I don't think so, because I still believe, if the people believe this, the frustration level I understand, but I also understand that the truth does win out. Truth is very powerful, and ideas are very powerful. So although they have these temporary victories, especially the young people who are looking forward to a lifetime of this, that they don't have to. And the reason I offer this up is because it's changing already. The empire is shrinking. Yeah. The dollar is going down internationally, and there's going to be an opportunity because we can't afford this nonsense.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Dr. Paul, I've been around you for a long time, so I think I've somehow taken on board your optimism. So I'm going to try to end on a happy note, on a good note, on a positive note, and just as a background, there are a lot of tears now all of a sudden being cried for the Kurds that no one talked about before. But this, remember, is just like in 2013 when we had to save the Yazidis. They were trapped on a hilltop. We had to go in, and endless sob stories about these Yazidis. And let's not make light of their plight. A lot of people are suffering. But that was simply a propaganda tool to get the American people to say, okay, Obama, you can go in there and save the Yazidis. It was supposed to be a 30-day operation to save these people. 6 years later, guess what? We're still there, and they say we can't leave. But let's look at recent history as an example of what we can do about the Kurd situation. Yeah, they might be in a tight spot right now. Well, our good friend Nebojsa Malic had a good article about the betrayal of the Kurds. And this is interesting because you only have to look back to 2016. Let's not forget, though, Obama embraced the Kurds only as a tool of regime change against Assad. He was part of the Assad. The Kurds were part of Assad must go. The idea was to create a state within the state in eastern Syria and managed by the Kurds. Totally untenable, insane policy, but that was a bright idea of Obama and his people, and that was the way they were going to overthrow Assad. And the Kurds bought into it. They loved that power. But let's look back to 2016. The Kurds were fighting in Raqqa. They were the boots on the ground in Raqqa, and the Turks, on Operation Euphrates Shield, attacked the Kurds from the rear as they were fighting in Raqqa. Pretty bad situation. The U.S. stood back and did nothing for the Kurds at this point. They were getting shot up bad. Then the Syrian Arab army, with the Russians fighting alongside, they stepped in to create a buffer zone between the Kurds and the Turks, and it was successful. The Turks backed off at that point. So there is a precedent for this. Turkey does not want to, in a lot of people's opinion, mine included, does not want to directly engage the Syrian Arab army, particularly with Russians fighting alongside. They've been there, they've done that. They shot down a Russian plane in 2015, and they almost were on the receiving end of some serious Russian weaponry. They don't want to go there again. So if we really want to help the Kurds, the best thing to do is back off and pull out.
Very good. I want to close by once again mentioning something I talk about a lot, and that is bipartisanship. We have bipartisanship on this foreign policy. Unfortunately, the people we had to quote were Republicans and Democrats, and they're all for staying there forever. And anybody that wants to come home, you're some sort of weird libertarian, So that's really well thought out. But On the issues, they stand together too often. They never argue about whether or not we need the presence of the Federal Reserve or interventionist foreign policy, regulating personal habits. It's very bipartisan, but it's not not bipartisan when it comes to who pulls the strings, who has the power, who gets to divvy up the loot. Then they fight over that, and that's what all this threat of impeachment's all about. And this is the reason why issues are important, but the American people need as much information as they can get, and that's why we are very grateful when you help us out and spread this message and get more people to watch our show, because it is beneficial. And actually our numbers are doing very well. We had a large number of people watch our show yesterday. So thank you for paying attention to that, and thank you for the support we get for non-interventionism, because that means you're for peace and prosperity. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. Come back soon.